problem with knowledge. So there's a parallel of anthropology with religion by cross-referencing two stories of creation that are both in alignment with the story of human brains becoming larger as a result of us holding more knowledge. One culture saw knowledge as evil and cursed women for this problem, as in the story of Eve and the fruit of knowledge, while the other culture saw knowledge as necessary in order to retain information on humanity's disasters so that people wouldn't make the same mistakes again. Before I narrate this excerpt, I have to explain that this story is told from the perspective of a society that views the world in terms of animism. Animism is actually the right brain or the left-handed way of viewing things, where you see more creativity and color. When I studied holistic healing, I learned that the left side of the body is the feminine side, and the right side of the body is the masculine side. The left brain, which controls the right side, is the masculine mind. And because we live in a right-handed dominant world, which this is proof that we live in patriarchy, most people are overly using the masculine side of their bodies and overly using the left brain masculine intelligence. CIA agents and many people who study the human mind have told me that women, on average, can see 30% more color than men. The world of animism reflects a feminine view of the world, a left-handed or right-brain view, which is why in the movie Avatar they worship a feminine deity. In order to not be too thrown off by the book, you have to understand it's being told from the perspective of animism, where everything has a life force, everything has a color.
Earth is just a dead thing you can claim, but I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name.
The modern movies Avatar, I think, display animism in a very beautiful way. In this book, a human being is referred to as a two-legged because everything is a person. So a tree is referred to as a standing person, a plant is referred to as a plant people, and even a stone is referred to as stone people or rock clan. The story is told from the perspective of a stone. At first, this seemed very primitive, but I realized this is actually more advanced to me than the Bible. When you study anthropology, you realize that, hey, the stones are where history and her stories' archaeological evidence is derived from. So in this part of the story that I'm going to narrate, the stone is found by a little girl named Alona. The stone is dropped and then found by one of Alona's great-great-great-granddaughters lineages later. The stone is telling the story from a stone's perspective in the world of animism where everything has a life force. According to the book, there were originally 5 races. They actually include the Atlantean history, which is the 3rd world. They believe there will be 7 worlds, and right now we are in the 4th to 5th. So this is the 2nd world that I'm going to narrate, according to the Iroquois people. This takes place after the 1st world was destroyed by the Yellow Race. The 1st world run by the Yellow Race was destroyed by fire or egotism. The 2nd world will be destroyed by ice, but I am going to narrate the part before its destruction. In the 2nd world, it is the native people that are dominant, or the brown people. The brown people are also referred to as the Red Earth people. This takes place in the Ice Age. Originally, the Earth wanted humanity, which is referred to as the two-leggeds, to remember the mistakes that they made in the ending of the 1st world and its destruction. However, there is a problem. As the brains keep getting bigger and bigger, women are no longer able to birth. So there has to be another way to store the remembering. This story can be paralleled with the biblical story of Genesis and a problem of knowledge being a curse on Eve because of the brain size causing hazardous childbirth situations for women. That night, Alona dreamed with me and we sorted out the language that would be taught by Wolf to the two-leggeds. The Earth tribe was in much need of a broader way to communicate. The grunts and groans mixed with sign language no longer expressed the fullness of feeling that these two-leggeds were experiencing. Many had been sky people who had chosen the limitations of human bodies in order to feel, touch, and share with their hearts. Now, Alona would have to complete part of her mission in this Earth walk by teaching wolf's language to her fellow humans. Through Alona and others, the brown race became dominant in the second world because they used their talents to survive and eventually flourish. Unlike the other races, these brown children of the Earth tribe carried the remembering in their frontal lobes and could access the memories of what had come before. I was filled with happiness as I reviewed the potential talents that could be developed through speech and through song, which was used by their creature counterparts. These two-leggeds were free to create on a level that would allow the beauty of their creations to be shared in a new and different way. Good medicine was flowing through the second world of creation, and I was allowed to be part of it. Alona felt my joy and cuddled me closer in her hand as she nestled deeper into her sleeping robes. That winter morning, we began to share the tundra wolf's song, and humankind started learning how to speak. As Alona came to adulthood and had a family of her own, the growth of the clan expanded. The cave paintings took on a new meaning for the people as each artist recalled through spoken story the inspiration behind the painted scenes. Life was changing among the brown faction of the Earth tribe. Each step in the growth process brought new discoveries and creations. It was becoming easier for these children of the two-leggeds to survive. The tubers, berries, and wild vegetables were gathered and stored in summer for use in winter. The healing herbs and their uses were better understood, which gave further sustenance to the children of the earth. These two-leggeds were learning how to interact with the plant people and use their green medicine to make human life longer and richer. Clan mothers and medicine women were their guiding forces and served the two-leggeds. All things were born of women, and it was understood that the Earth Mother was the source of all the physical needs of her children. As those needs were supplied by the planetary mother, the women of the clans nurtured their families in turn. This was the natural order of life in the second world. The men took the role of protectors and providers for the families, developing their talents of courage and boldness. The honoring of the Earth Mother spilled from that knowing into the lives of all two-leggeds, as the men honored the woman as extensions of the original mother of all things. Harmony ensued, and the circle of the faithful was once again complete. Alona lived many winters while she shared her courage and wisdom with the clan. It was many generations later that I came into the hands of one of her great-grandchildren's grandchildren called Ishna. The life of the clan had been slowly changing. Carelessness and desire for control of the clan's destiny had ravaged the good medicine that had been nurtured for centuries by the early clan mothers. I was saddened to see those changes as the people of the Earth tribe turned their backs on the sacred traditions of their ancestors. The sparkle of harmony had been tarnished as life became less survival-oriented for these brown two-leggeds. The teachings of the totems were being ignored, and spoken language now contained disdain and critical words of ugliness.
The storm was blowing up your horizon. Change has come.
The enemy of greed had surfaced again, and with this ghost of the past, self-importance had stolen the hearts of people. The desire for community and equality had been plowed under, and the new seeds of lust for control were growing into thistles of prideful antagonism and resentment. The winds of change had blown the seeds of love to the four directions. Dominance was prevalent in the attitudes of those inside our sheltering cave. The woman no longer nurtured the young as they once had. The men were slovenly and demanding of the woman who feared the birth of new children. The memory of all that had gone before was still adding girth to the frontal lobes of the brown human's brains, which made the delivering of offspring nearly impossible. The pelvic spread of women did not grow to match the remembering being stored in the heads of the coming generations. Many of the children born to the Earth tribe came into the world
after long hours of labor and at great pain to their mothers. Some of the babies would never utter their first cry. Others would be born only to live a few breaths of life and then travel the road of spirit, dropping their robes within the space of a few heartbeats. The medicine women were confused as to the reason for the difficult births and frequent deaths among the future generations. A clan was only as strong as its numbers, for much work was needed to survive in the ice world.
Frozen heartbeat under the snow. I've been waiting, ready to grow. Shivering and weathering storms. Dreaming of.
Among the brown race of the Earth tribe, the ritual of birth and death had created a tradition that continued from generation to generation. The birth blood of an infant marked the child as a child of the people. The clan discovered through hunting and eating various animals that all creature beings also had red blood, which was a sign of being part of the planetary family. Those of the Earth's mother's family were to be smeared with red clay and placed again in her womb when the body died. The Red Earth people knew that they would return to walk the Earth Mother, being born of her body when the spirits called them to be born again. These people were the brown race, but were called the Red Earth people because they started using red ochre paint made from clay and the fat of musk ox to show that they were faithful to the Earth Mother. Since that time, the color red has denoted faith among those who count themselves among the people or the faithful. These two-leggeds gladly give the robe that cloaked their spirit back to the Mother Earth to fertilize her soil, so that through their empty bodies, others may find nourishment. The green medicines of the plant people grow abundantly from the Earth Mother, where a two-legged who shared in this way is buried.
The problem with brains becoming larger in the process of the human evolution is that as the brains became larger, the female pelvises did not widen in proportion to the brain size. This resulted in many babies being born dead or dying soon afterwards. This also resulted in a fear of motherhood and a mistreatment of mothers. One culture cursed and blamed women for a collective human problem, and the other one held men accountable for their misalignment with earth medicine and advised women to learn and master shamanic healing. So, obviously, the first story of cursing women for knowledge comes from the Bible. One story comes from extreme patriarchy of the Abrahamic religions, as told in the Bible, and the other comes from the Iroquois tribe, which was a matrilineal society that helped integrate women into politics in 1919 from the women's suffrage movement. So it was European women that came to the Iroquois Native Americans for help in order to integrate themselves into politics. Many Native American women claim that the positions that were formerly held by women are actually being held by men as a result of a failure of the United States government, which was a result of European patriarchy, which was a result of biblical patriarchy. They claim that their positions were held by women, but they weren't recognized. And so they, in order to be recognized as an official tribe of the United States, many of their traditional positions held by women actually had to be taken over by men. I have been trying to piece together the history of everything because it just seems like everywhere I go, matriarchy is wiped out. There is proof that they've wiped out records. I mean, when they had Egyptian pharaoh queens, they have proof that they took their face and they took it off their statues and they put male faces in there. And when they had the Chinese empress, they took that off the records because for some reason they didn't want any record of women ever having any power. There's been this idea where in spirituality, they only have Jesus and Buddha. Everybody always mentions them as if men are the only spiritual people. For every Jesus, there's an unnamed woman. I mean, for every time somebody talks about Jesus or uses his name, there is an equally spiritual woman who was not even validated or put in the books because of patriarchy, basically. The word testament comes from testosterone, testes. It's the word of men. The Bible says, like, the word of men, it's not the word of people, the word of people of light. It's the word of men, and now it's become the word of the brotherhood of white, basically. It's been skewed so many times. The testament comes from the word testes, testosterone, testimony. It's demeaning and degrading the women. I did study anthropology, and I do it in my free time because after living on the Indian reservation,
I stayed in the Oyati Crow Creek Reservation for 1 to 2 years, which is actually right above a very amazing site now. They didn't have this when I stayed there, but they made a really amazing female statue called Dignity. After I spent time hiking in archaeological sites and ancient native forests, I became so much more aware of a lot of the things that our government is doing to people everywhere. The crazy thing is that the things that our government does to the Native Indigenous people have a ripple effect on all Americans, like poisoning food, poisoning water. This has a ripple effect on everybody in the United States. Although by blood, I am probably only a quarter to 30% Native, I shared a lot of the stories of the ancestral trauma. The trauma seems to be so great that I started to get sick and lose my voice when making this section of the video, which is why I have such a raspy voice right now.
Another assault on Pueblo life, the Religious Crimes Code. In direct violation of the Constitution, the U.S. government made our religion illegal.
Until the old customs and Indian practices are broken up among these people, we cannot hope for a great amount of progress. The secret dance is perhaps one of the greatest evils. What goes on I will not attempt to say, but I firmly believe that it is little less than a ribald system of debauchery.
The ancestral trauma includes mass genocide and the criminalization of indigenous religions. There is a complete lack of awareness on the First Amendment in the United States because what people don't realize is that it gives people the right to believe anything, but it does not give people the right to practice religions, including religions that are from a more colorful, feminine life force, animism. And this isn't religions where they're sacrificing humans. These are just religions that are different from patriarchal religions. Up until the 1960s and 70s, it would appear that the United States government criminalized feminine-oriented religions.
I realize how whitewashed or European washed or how brainwashed. I don't want to say whitewashed because I think Europeans, Christianity was forced on pagan Europeans the same way it was brutally enforced on the native people. It just happened hundreds of years before they came over here as brainwashed people trying to spread their religion. Other council fires were here before ours, written on Native American oral tradition, which they felt was so needed at this time that they went against their own rules where they can't write their history down. It has to be spoken from one person to another, especially a healer or a wise person. They wrote it down because they knew that humanity needed this knowledge at this point in time. This book is amazing. If you read it with the same reverence that you have been taught to read the Bible with. So the Bible, everybody knows the story about Adam and Eve listened to a snake and wanted knowledge and took the fruit of knowledge and then ended up being cursed with childbirth pains. The Bible's a metaphor. The knowledge was a metaphor for the brain becoming bigger. And in anthropology, what we learned was that the brains became bigger and bigger, but the female pelvis did not expand wider in proportionate to the brains of humans or humanoids. Childbirth, instead of being this easy and revered practice among women, it became this stressful or fearful part of your life. Like a lot of babies were born dead. They were born still. A lot of women died giving birth. According to the Native American oral history of the story of creation, the world had already ended once before. The world had ended from human error in the first world, and this was their version of the second world, which is just the second civilization. The babies' heads needed to be bigger to store the knowledge and the history.
And her story. History and her story together.
Of humanity so that they would not make the same errors and mistakes again. So you have two cultures, and even Asian people didn't handle birthing the same. They don't have this idea that women are cursed with childbirth and it has to be this painful, horrible process.
I used to live in Minnesota where there was a really large percentage of Hmong people from the mountains of China. And the Hmong people were similar, where the women did not have a hard time giving birth. They were actually made fun of by Western doctors because They would describe the women giving birth as simply just squatting down and doing it in a very stoic, easy way. This is because they did not grow up with a cultural idea that women are cursed. The book, The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, further elaborates on the cultural differences and the conditioning in which women are programmed with to give birth. Similarly to the way the Native people have been persecuted by the United States government, the Hmong people were persecuted by the Chinese government for being a culture of animism, which is a culture that sees the color, the world of creativity, color, the left-handed path, the feminine way.
The way to get around their hips not evolving fast enough to birth bigger heads and bigger brains from babies was to practice yoga, practice belly dancing, which is why today you have women doing gymnastics or you have them being put in dance classes. It's to create strong, healthy bodies with reference to their femininity. Sports like soccer, football, masculine sports where it's about force, fighting, strength. And I'm not saying women shouldn't have strength, but they don't do it as well as men because men have testosterone. Testosterone helps men create bigger muscles and just stronger bodies in general, and estrogen actually makes women more flexible. But as a result, women lose strength. So there's a give and take. For the strength men have, they lose their flexibility, and for the flexibility women gain, they don't have the ability to create muscles as easy. But that is actually so in the birthing process, their hips can stretch and widen and then return back to normal, which is needed given the evolution of bigger heads, but without proportion to women's hip size. Based on your cultural interpretation of these things, that actually manifested into either women having a really hard time giving birth and needing to go to the hospital and being cut open, or women just needing to put more work and more time into flexibility, yoga, belly dancing. Belly dancing is just a form of fertility dancing, strengthening your core muscles. It's really just a form to get your body to give birth naturally, because back in the day, they weren't cutting women open and sewing them back up. The splits. My mother taught me from the Catholic religion that she came from that you could lose your virginity doing the splits. I hope I could just bring some light from other cultures that were more matriarchal about how you can interpret something. There is some accuracy in both of those interpretations. But one culture, the Iroquois, chose to interpret women having a harder time giving birth as people's brains growing because they had to remember all the mistakes humanity made for the first destruction of the civilization so that they wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. The way those cultures handled it was more holistic versus the way our culture handles it is drug a woman up, keep her out of her body, dissociated from her body. But the more you dissociate, when you put painkillers and all that stuff, when women give birth, they are no longer able to dilate. They no longer have the strength because they no longer have as much control over their body. So one culture gave women more control and knowledge over their own body, and the other culture disconnected and disempowered women and claimed it was a curse. And this actually manifested into the physical reality that our culture has today with childbirth. Just sharing matriarchal knowledge because it has been wiped from history, and a lot of the problems that men and women are both facing right now isn't a result of matriarchy and feminism. It's a result of extreme patriarchy, wiping records out, wiping knowledge out, disempowering people, disconnecting people from their own bodies and not giving people the power to heal themselves. It's sick care, not health care. This disregard for plants, where pharmacy has to be pills and instead of natural plant medicine, which is viewed as primitive, which is actually much more versatile, much more empowering. You can grow plants in your gardens. So in cultures like Asian cultures and Native American cultures, you did not need the hospitals to birth children because women did things that already strengthened their bodies. In our culture, C-sections were the way to get around it, cutting women open. But this was disconnecting a woman from her body by drugging her. Even in labor, putting women on painkillers disconnects them from their body, and they are more likely to need a C-section when they put them on that, because then they are not dilating properly, they're not pushing at the right time because they can't feel themselves. So other cultures just handled it by strengthening women and teaching them flexibility. They didn't teach them that yoga, flexibility, dancing, gymnastics, pole dancing, whatever was evil, devil worshiping. It was a way to strengthen and be in control of your body. And patriarchy has taught women and people, not just women. Healthcare today, it's not about owning your own body. It's not trusting your body. It's giving your health to somebody else. And if you have a problem, it usually involves, well, just remove the gallbladder, just remove the thyroid. It doesn't involve healing that body part. It involves, oh, well, you don't need it if you're on this medicine for the rest of your life. Well, then you do need your thyroid if you have to be on medicine for the rest of your life. I'm just trying to explain how handling a problem by blaming it on women and cursing women in your religion versus saying, hey, this is a collective problem. We have medicine to get around it that's not disempowering people. We have other ways, was manifested into people from other cultures being able to give birth with a lot of ease. Probably not as much ease as before the human brain evolved so big, but enough ease where they could trust their own bodies and maybe just need a midwife or more natural, more gentle, holistic ways. The Indian story of creation is so, from an anthropological perspective, it's very spot on. There are so many accuracies in it. If you treat it with the same reverence as you have been indoctrinated to treat the Bible with testicles, if you don't have testes, your word isn't in the Bible, which is why they didn't include women. We are subliminally programmed to worship men.
The sad thing is that we are also being subliminally programmed to degrade women. These mainstream religions program women to put down other women, and they program men to put down women as well. The really sad thing is we just accept this as a reality because everybody else believes in this. We've lost the left-handed path, the part of your brain that gets you out of slavery and mind control and follows your own truth instead of the herd like a sheep.
But the arena's mainframe for the obedience discs have been deactivated and the slaves have armed themselves.
Oh, I don't like that word.
Which mainframe?
No. Why would I not like mainframe? No, the yes word, yes word.
Sorry, the prisoners with jobs have armed themselves.
The language bias of making the right-handed path right and the left-handed path evil is a patriarchal biblical bias. So the left-handed path is not any worse than the right-handed path. We need both hemispheres of our brains for a reason, and we also need both sides of our body for a reason. And anyone who overuses one side of their body, whether it's left or right, will encounter serious health problems. The word ambidextrous comes from the idea that both sides are right. You have to use a balance of both sides of your body and both hemispheres of your brain.
People always mention is Buddha and Jesus. It's like, okay, well, that's great that you may have been taught that there are these spiritual people that helped other people, but they were not the best spiritual people, and they were not the only spiritual people that existed. They were the spiritual people that mainstream people chose to put in their stories and perpetuate because they helped patriarchy, which helped the agenda of basically tyrannical kings trying to fight wars. Our history has been, the matriarchal history has been purposely wiped out. Like even in the Bible, it was Mary Magdalene was purposely wiped out. She was labeled a prostitute to discredit what she had to say from her perspective. She was actually equally as spiritual as Jesus. And actually her family had a lot of money that if you look at the history.
And her story.
So this idea of her being a prostitute was pretty much something men did just to discredit her and say, well, she's a prostitute, don't listen to her. That's the nature of the patriarchy, is just label women, sexualize women so they don't have a voice, and blindly militarize men and brainwash them so they blindly follow a hierarchy of tyrants. You could have anthropology and historical accuracies in many holy books, but the way they write them shows the cultural treatment towards women. And the Iroquois were a matrilineal tribe. They were a tribe of matrilineal values, and they wrote the book Other Council Fires Were Here Before Ours. And they did not put women down. Both men and women had lost connection to the earth. They lost connection to medicine from the earth. And the second ending of the world ended in ice. And according to this book, the third ending ended in water, which is what Noah's Ark and every story around the world has a story about a great flood that wiped out almost all of civilization. And right now we are in the fourth to fifth world, which 2012 was the transition. This book is so intricate. I'm going to make a whole nother video on this book. It's so great. The Indians actually had much more of an accurate story of creation than the Bible. From studying anthropology. And I know anthropology is biased to many anthropologists on YouTube that say that just because their findings didn't fit the mainstream narrative, that they disregarded their findings, which is what they do with women too. If you find a matriarchal society like bonobos, elephants, or something that totally defies patriarchal mainstream religious ideology of the three Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they will say that, oh, that doesn't exist. I mean, nobody will publish it. Nobody will want to acknowledge it. And so I know anthropology can be biased too, but there isn't like some kind of huge debate about brain size getting bigger in humanoids to humans. And actually, human brains have become smaller.
According to archaeological evidence, the human brain was the size of a lemon larger 30,000 years ago. The human brain began to get smaller around 10,000 years ago.
And mankind became stupider at a frightening rate. Some had high hopes that genetic engineering would correct this trend in evolution. But sadly, the greatest minds and resources were focused on conquering hair loss and prolonging erections. Meanwhile,
many spiritual people say that this was the losing of the human third eye, the intuition, which in the book Other Council Fires Were Here Before Ours is referred to as the remembering. When you combine spiritual and archaeological scientific knowledge together, many people theorize that our third eye used to be the size of a ping pong ball or a lemon, and it grew smaller now to the size of a pea.
The Earth ended up in an ice age, and this was the same time women were dealing with palaces needing to find a way to expand to birth bigger brains. I think the ice age meant that the Earth mother froze. I don't want to refer to the Earth as a mother because I believe Earth is both masculine and feminine, just like the sun is both masculine and feminine. I don't like this idea of assigning men to the sun and women to the moon. I think that's very disempowering. But the Iroquois do view the Earth as a feminine entity. The metaphors behind the idea of freezing in the Ice Age, this was paralleled with women needing to have more time to expand their hips. So in this time, it's actually showing anthropology, the brain got bigger, then it got smaller. It's actually smaller today, which started around the domestication of grains and farms, which happened around 10,000 years ago. For whatever reason it happened, I mean, people are suggesting that humans are getting more stupid.
I have one bucket that holds 2 gallons and another bucket that holds 5 gallons. How many buckets do you have?
2?
Thank you.
But it might also have been because the brain got more dense. Just like muscle can be more dense, you can have more brain coil. There's a lot of theories. So that's why many people are saying we are actually going back into the 5th dimension. We used to have this knowledge and we're regaining it. Now we can handle it. We've had time. People have hopefully evolved. And so we can handle expanding, once again, our consciousness and our awareness.